Who is David? Well, he's best known for slaying Goliath, defeating the Philistines, and becoming the second king of Israel after Saul. But that's just a tiny part of his incredible life story. Join us as we unveil the man after God's own heart in today's episode. What's amazing about David's story is that it's all found in the Bible. It was written by those who knew him personally, were with him during his battles, and followed him through thick and thin. The book of 1 Samuel tells us that when Samuel was ready to anoint a new king, the Lord told him not to look at his appearance or his height because he had rejected him. God wanted someone better than anyone else thought. So God said to Samuel, "Arise, go to Bethlehem. The first boy you meet as you enter the city is the one you are to anoint." When Samuel got to Bethlehem, he saw the handsome sons of the ruler there. And this is what he thought: surely the Lord's anointed is among these. As they passed Jesse, the father of David, Samuel thought, surely the Lord's anointed is this one, or maybe one of them. But the Lord told him, "Look at this boy David, son of Jesse. He is the one who will save you and your family and all Israel from the hands of the Philistines. The Holy Spirit will come powerfully upon him. My servant David will become great and be exalted. He is the one who will build my temple, and I will establish his royal offspring forever." So when Samuel took a small vial of olive oil, he poured it on David's head. And from that day on, the Spirit of the Lord came on David, and he began to prophesy. And Samuel went home. David went back to his work taking care of his father's sheep. David's story began as a simple shepherd boy who was the youngest of 8 sons. His older brothers were called Eliab, Abinadab, and Shammah. His name, David, means beloved or friend. Imagine being the youngest of 8 boys and being overlooked and underestimated like David was. How did he go from being an ordinary shepherd boy to becoming a legendary king? Let's find out. After Samuel anointed him, David lived a double life. By day, he tended his father's sheep, and at night he stayed in the city with the other young men, learning the skills needed to defend the city. David fought off bears and lions that came to steal his sheep, and he knew if he could fight off wild animals, then he could defeat any man. Little did he know that soon he would get his chance. Now, let's talk about Goliath, the man whose name became synonymous with overwhelming odds. He was a Gittite, a member of a Philistine tribe that often fought against Israel. Standing over 9 feet tall, he was armed with bronze armor weighing around 125 pounds. Imagine seeing this guy charging towards you. Every day for 40 days, Goliath challenged the Israelites to a one-on-one fight, but no one accepted. Why? Because everyone thought he was unbeatable. All the Israelites thought he was too big and strong for anyone to defeat. But not David. He was convinced that with God's help, he could do it. When David heard Goliath challenging the Israelites, he asked his father Jesse for some armor. Jesse gave him what he asked for, but it didn't fit. David wasn't tall or muscular like Goliath. With no armor to protect him, and only a sling and 5 stones in his bag, he seemed totally unprepared to face the giant. However, David had something that Goliath didn't have. He had faith in God. David said, "The Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine." When Goliath mocked David, saying how he looked like a little boy playing with a sling, David replied that he would slay Goliath in the name of Israel's God. With a few pebbles and a slingshot, David ran toward the giant while Goliath was running toward him with sword raised high. David dodged the deadly blow and quickly threw a stone with all his might. It hit Goliath right between the eyes. The giant was stunned. David ran closer, drew his sword, and plunged it into Goliath's neck. The Philistines saw their champion fall and fled. The Israelites cheered and praised God for saving them. And so David became famous throughout the land. From that day on, David served King Saul. He was welcomed everywhere. Everyone loved him, and Saul's daughters danced before him. But as time went on, Saul grew jealous of David's popularity and tried to kill him several times. One day, Saul ordered his son Jonathan, who was friends with David, to take David out into the wilderness and kill him there. But Jonathan made up an excuse and saved David's life. When David heard that Saul planned to kill him, he fled. He went from place to place, staying with friends and relatives. Sometimes he hid in caves. Other times he had to run away from Saul's soldiers. While he was hiding, many people joined him because they wanted to escape Saul's forced labor. And that's how David built his army. Years passed, and Saul's jealousy never faded. One day, while David and his men were in a cave, they were visited by a group of 3,000 men. They asked David to be their king. David refused, though, because he didn't want to cause trouble. Instead, he waited patiently for God to tell him what to do. Meanwhile, Saul's son, Jonathan, became close friends with David. They made a brotherhood pact. Jonathan removed his robe and gave it to David, along with his armor and sandals. Jonathan also gave David the dagger that hung at his waist. But later, when Saul learned that Jonathan and David were friends, he was furious and blamed Jonathan for betraying him. Then he chased David and his men into the wilderness. That's when David's patience wore out. He wished he had power to punish Saul and end his suffering once and for all. David's men urged him to kill Saul, but he refused. Instead, he cut off a piece of Saul's robe and took it back to the city. The next day, David told the leaders how Saul had treated him and showed them the robe he had cut off. The leaders were appalled and punished Saul for his behavior. This happened more than once. Each time David had a chance to hurt Saul, he didn't. Instead, he showed mercy. He even helped Saul out of danger several times. One day, Saul and his men were camped near a hill. David and his men were hiding in a cave nearby. Saul's men went inside the cave to relieve themselves, and David's men were waiting for them. They could easily have killed them all, but they didn't. They waited until morning, then called out to Saul and his men and reminded them that they were there. When Saul realized he was in the cave, he cried out, "Is this thing so very great in your sight, men of David, that the king should be counted as a vile person? Is that the manner of kings whom you would treat in your sight?" Then David answered, "Truly, as I live before God, so do I swear that you have been numbered this day in the breach or wall for King of Israel. And I know that your majesty shall surely die in one of the two." When Saul heard these words, he was greatly afraid and fell on the ground and besought David, saying, "Are you still angry with the king? Why? Why does David answer with such words?" And he rebuked him and said, "Is this thing so very great in your sight, men of David, that the king should be counted as a vile person? Why have my words not fallen, you mighty men, to the ground? Truly, I swear by the living Lord that you are accounted as a breach and a wall in Israel." and the king's face is certain before me." Then David said, "This day you shall not die, and as a reward I will yet save you to a great deliverance." So when David spoke to Saul, somehow the edge of his anger was turned from him, and he swore to him by God. Then David rose, and Jonathan and the men who were with him, and they went out. Afterwards Saul returned to his place, and David and his men went into the city. Then the Lord spoke to David in a vision, saying, "Do not fear, David, for Saul your enemy will become your servant and will prophesy with his own mouth. Moreover, the Lord will prolong his days." David, however, did not trust the prophecy. He knew that Saul was dangerous and feared for his own safety and that of his men. So he decided to strike Saul down. He took a sharp stone and slung it with all his might, striking the edge of Saul's shield. Then Saul felt pain in his shoulder and asked his armor-bearer to pull his spear out of its sheath, but David escaped. Later, when David consulted the Lord, he was told that he must not harm the Lord's anointed. This made David feel bad. He didn't want to disobey God, so he stopped trying to hurt Saul. Years passed, and Saul kept chasing David. Eventually, both Saul and his son Jonathan died in a battle with the Philistines. After they died, David became the king of Israel. Many years later, when David was old, he knew it was time to pass on the kingdom to his son Solomon. Before that, though, he had to deal with a rebellion led by his son Adonijah. Adonijah wanted to make himself king instead of his younger brother Solomon. David chose Solomon and officially handed over the kingdom to him. But not everyone was happy about this. Adonijah and his supporters rode their horses into Jerusalem. They shouted, "Long live Adonijah, king of Israel!" But the people stayed loyal to Solomon. When David heard about the commotion, he immediately summoned Adonijah and scolded him. He pointed out that Adonijah had acted hastily and arrogantly, just like their ancestor Joseph had done long ago. David then commanded Adonijah to leave the city without delay. So that's the story of David, the man after God's own heart. What can we learn from him? Well, David was a man of many talents. He was a brave warrior, a skilled musician, and a humble servant of God. He faced many challenges in his life, but he never gave up. He trusted in God and followed his plan, even when things seemed impossible. David reminds us that no matter who you are or where you come from, you can accomplish anything with God on your side. Thanks for watching.